Right, so today's guest on the Coffee, Chaos and Confidence podcast with me, Coach Casey, is someone I've been socially stalking for a little while. So if you ever need any evidence, this is the evidence you need. I first found out about this person through the world of YouTube by looking up things like sporting events, CrossFit, being a massive CrossFit fan, and looking at various different ways of kind of progressing my own fitness. And this guy came along and so today's guest is Mr. John Chapman, who when I was having a little look back on some of the things that I remember, and it's weird, John, because being in that world of like loving fitness and loving the whole CrossFit community and stuff, I feel like you're very different now to what I remember you when I first met you, and if anything, kind of what first inspired me to kind of follow you guys online. So, John, do you want to just give like a little introduction and tell me a little bit about like who you are, so everyone kind of knows who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I am a personal trainer, nutrition coach, dad of two. Got a little boy that's 1, Otis, and my daughter Bobby. She's just turned 6, so that keeps me very busy. And yes, me and my business partner at the time, Leon, we had one of the kind of first YouTube channels around fitness, and that kind of took us around the world to write book, all kinds of different weird and wonderful things. And long story short, it's kind of come back to full circle again now, where I'm back in full-time coaching, which I absolutely adore, and helping people, become harder to kill through the kind of training that we do, and just kind of helping people change their lives, which has been immensely rewarding this year. I think just how much impact you can have on people's life when you give it your full attention, and it's been a pretty special year. Well, the past year and this year's gone nuts as things start. So yeah, that's a kind of a very brief thing about me.
Amazing. And do you know what I love about the world of social media? You know how when you, because the crazy thing is I've met Leon in real life, but I've never actually met you in person. But bizarrely, through being in your HDK program and in the TLM program before, I kind of feel like you speak to people all the time. And it's quite weird, isn't it, that this kind of virtual world, even to the point that when you just said your daughter is 6 years old, I just was like, yeah,
So fast.
I definitely remember him posting about his daughter being born. And I'm like, well, it's like we always watch Craig Ritchie on his channel, and it's like I remember them getting the dogs. I remember them moving house. Like, you know what I mean? It's all this stuff that you watch in this kind of almost. I don't want to compare you to the Kardashians because I've never watched the Kardashians, but do you know what I mean? It's like you almost feel like you know people in this kind of world. I wanted to go straight into a video that I remember watching with you. And I think it's one of the things that really got me straight away with why I resonated with you. And that was that there's a massive link for me where, excuse me, my wife and I started watching Joe Wicks. Now, I remember watching Joe Wicks and thinking, not really for me. But watching Joe Wicks one day, he had this guy on there who has become a friend, and I know you know him well, Faisal. And I was watching Faisal on there, and I was like, damn, this guy's got some energy. And then through watching him and learning about you guys and stuff, this particular video that really struck out for me, and I've even just been back and watched it this morning whilst I was having my non-sugary cereal, Coach. Honestly, it was a healthy breakfast. This video was you doing the Turf Games competition with Wit. And what I absolutely loved about this video more than anything, and I hope you won't mind me saying this, well, I mean, the title was in it, was the fact that I think it was called something like In the Pain Cave. And there is an element of that video where you are doing burpees over a dead ball and you are politely on your ass. And do you know what, John? This is why I really why I really resonate with you and why I resonate with the fitness community as well, is the fact that everyone was around you. Everyone was supporting you. You were the guy that was inspiring us to watch the video. You were on your ass, but you were inspiring us. And it wasn't the guy who was winning. And it was the fact that, I mean, at the end, there's Faisal was like whacking you on the back and, bigging you up and stuff. And I just think something for me that really resonated with you from the very outset, and also, some of the guys with, Wit and Faisal and those kind of guys, is the massive thing. And it's the big link back to why I work with you now, is community. So like, has community been like a big thing for you within your kind of fitness journey?
My life revolves around people. Everything is about people. I'm a twin growing up, so computer games were always cooperative games. I would rather play a co-op game than I would play an individual game by myself. My favorite thing about jiu-jitsu, what I spend most of my time doing, is the people that I do it with. Everything in my life is about people and working with people, and that's where I get my energy from. Like, I'm a big believer in it doesn't matter how much, whether you go down to cellular level or whether you go down to like woo chasing butterflies in the garden, it all comes down to energy at the end of the day. And you know what it's like. You can talk, you probably have it on podcasts. You can talk to one person and you leave the podcast and you feel almost deflated a little bit and just zapped of energy. Like that was hard work. And then other people you speak to and you come away from the conversation, you feel motivated and you feel energized. And what I like to do for the most part is, as much as possible, surround myself with people that, you know, top my cup back up again. Because in the job that I do, I spend a lot of time talking to people and just throwing as much energy into people as possible. And it's really important that you learn and you find ways to top your own cup back up again. And I remember that comp in particular. That was my first individual CrossFit comp. The thing is, through already having a big social media following, especially on YouTube, then going into the CrossFit world, because that's not originally where we started. One of my best mates, Zach, he was the fittest in the UK a few years back, well, quite a few years back. That's probably like 2018 or something along those lines. And we met through a supplement sponsor that we were working with together and just kind of hit it off. And he kind of got me into CrossFit. And I would have had probably the opposite opinion to it before, like most generic gym goers, like, what are you doing? Loved it. But because of that, my comparisons and my friendship group for the most part were the elite of the sport, which I just was not. So when I did my first individual comp, I got put in the top tier of group with like the games athletes and people that were the fittest. And I'm like, why am I in this top tier? And like, I mean, the workouts were horrific. It was tough, but I was doing it. I was happy with where I was at. Then we got to that last workout and it was really heavy med ball over shoulders. And I just looked at this as like, no part of me wants to do this. I'm like, I'm just going to try and grip and send it, and it's going to be do or die. And that's exactly what it was. I tried to go touch and go over the shoulder with the ball, and it fell off my shoulder at one point, and I knew I had to pick it up again. At that point, I was dead. And I remember Faisal and everyone coming up to me and patting me on the back, like, let's go. Inside, I was saying, fuck off, a lot of you. Just fuck off. Leave me alone. Let me die here. I'm quite happy. I've done enough. So yeah, I mean, there's levels to it at the end of the day. But back to your point where you said that you resonate with people. I've never been afraid to be vulnerable online. Like, we're spoken about therapy, the benefits that it has. I've always championed that. But every YouTube video I did, and every even short videos, I did a little challenge the other day on Instagram of this like silly handstand rolling over a bench. Everything you do, you want to try and tell a story, because that's what brings people in. The reason people love the Rocky movies and they are such cult classics and the soundtrack and everything about them is because it's Phoenix from the Flames. You know, he crashes and burns. How's he going to come back against all the odds? And then he does it. No one wants to see someone go in there and just destroy everyone, because you can't resonate to it, because everyone's got their own challenges. Wolf of Wall Street, doesn't matter what it is. It's the rag to riches thing. And doesn't matter if it's a minute-long Instagram reel or it's a 20-minute YouTube video. People want to be able to resonate with it, and every single person, no matter their walk of life, has challenges that they have to come up against.
What I think is really mad as well, and looking back at that particular video, again, you don't know this, but that video inspired me to learn more about turf games. That video alone took me on a journey to judge 4 turf games events. I went to the events, I competed at the events, and I remember being in the TLM program at the time back then, messaging you guys and going, I'm doing my first turf games. And like, I'd been put together in a put together group where there was no like going in with friends. I just went, do you know what? I'm going for it. And I feel like a lot of that had a lot to do with the way, particularly like, looking at the way that happened and the way that transpired for me. I then went on to judge at the Arnold. I went to judge, was High Rock's head judge for a little while as well. And the community that just came from that. And I genuinely was reflecting on it this morning. I was just like, I wonder if I would have done any of those things if I hadn't have watched that one video. So
interesting.
Yeah, so it was really, for me, it was really, I mean, I'd always loved fitness before. and I used to do CrossFit and so forth. But when I kind of started looking at people that were doing it, the thing that, again, this is why I really wanted to kind of chat to you today as well, was the fact that there's like a community that we've got in the HTK program, which I just absolutely love. And I just love the fact that it was like an outside kind of almost influence, like, like you walk past a sign and you go, oh yeah, I'll go in that shop, that looks really good. And it was almost like that brought me in. But at the end of the day, it's like what that has then offered me over and above what that was, it's
Yeah, I
just
appreciate that.
incredible. So John, I've got a question I really want to ask you. And you've just mentioned Zach. Now, Zach is now currently steel in, am I allowed to say he is steel, or is he steel and Zach George? Or is he
Do you
just
know,
steel? I don't know how you refer to him now.
I don't think it makes me laugh at, to be honest, because they're obviously all in character. So when the gladiators, 'cause I know a few of them through just past experiences and friends of mine, they, for the most part, even though they've known each other, for some of them for 10 years, for example, Shell and Zach, you still call each other by their gladiator names, because I think they have to, because
Stay in
if they break
character.
character in it, yeah. So when like I was at Zach's wedding and he was talking about Matt, who's Legend, and he's like, oh, Legend. I was like, who the fuck is Legend? And he's like, Matt. I was like, oh, right. And I was like, oh, we're just calling everyone by their gladiator names now,
Well,
are
that
we?
was
In
going
that
to be
case, can
part
I
of
make
my
one up?
question when they got married, because you were there. Did she marry Zach or did she marry Steele?
She did marry, Sam did marry Zach on that day. I can confirm.
Amazing. So with that in mind, then, if you were a gladiator, John, what would your
Mm.
gladiator name be?
Oh, wow. That's a question. What would my gladiator name be? Because they're not necessarily, actually, that's a lie. I was about to say they're not necessarily named on their persona or their attributes, but Matt is Legend. He's bloody hilarious. Mountain, Jamie definitely is, because he's giant.
I've stood next to Zach at a comp. Trust me, he's definitely looks like steel, and I wouldn't mess with him.
He's a big old boy. I would probably do something, would be a play on words, slightly self-deprecating, of something about having no calves, something along those lines,
Oh wow!
Bambi or something like that would probably be the one.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So John, when you talked about earlier on, we were saying about family and having kids, and one thing again, I talk about quite a lot is kind of parenting and that kind of
Hmm.
thing. How has that your fitness goal changed, or your fitness? I suppose, what does fitness mean to you now compared to like what it meant before kids and like now having kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually, because for me, it's not changed that much. My goal, always, my overarching goal with fitness and health has been longevity. I want to live as well as I can for as long as I can. That's always been the first and foremost. Second has always been performance, from that perspective. So even when it's CrossFit, it wasn't always what's the best route to get stronger, because, I mean, I don't know what we're talking about here, but, some people go down the route of steroids. And like, but that would never align with my goals when it came to long-term health and those type of things. So those type of things are off the cards for me. So that's why, for me, health was always my primary thing. But the main thing that changed for me when the kids came, apart from the time crunch, was actually more set an example. I knew that my ethos and everything that I've set up already took into account for being able to run with them, being able to play with them, being able to do all those things with them. I've already taken care of that. I've been doing that for a long time. But how do I start to install in them, being looking after themselves and setting a good role model? And the same thing with nutrition. That's a challenge for kids as well. But actually, my wife, Rose, she said something to me this morning. She's like, I forgot to tell you, Bobby was riding her bike the other day, and she rode it all the way to the shop and all the way back, and she fell off, but she did great. And Rose was like, oh, I was really proud of you for how you rode your bike to the shop. You did amazing, and that's really good exercise. And she apparently turned around and beamed at Rose and went, is that exercise? Is that good for me? She's like, yes, it is.
Oh,
And she's like,
bless.
oh, exciting. Do you know what I mean? It's trying to build those positive reinforcements with things that are good for you without making it a pressurized thing or out of the side of fear. I don't want to be, oh, you need to do this because this will happen to you. It's because you do it to you because it makes you feel good, and we know that it allows us to do things that, that we want to do. Like, same thing with fast food. The kids have McDonald's from time to time. I have McDonald's from time to time. The problem I have with it is and the way I choose to approach it, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I don't make it a big thing. It's not a celebration that we're going to McDonald's, because if you look at all the fast food adverts, particularly that brand, they don't advertise food, they advertise emotions. It's all about, I'm feeling good. It's about family connection. It's about people being sad and suddenly being happy again. And they play on vulnerability and emotions. And I don't personally like that. And I would love it if that wasn't allowed to happen, because, you know, you're almost saying that something's going to get, it's false advertising to a certain extent, I feel.
Do you know what? It's funny that you've just touched on that, because we recently watched the new Cadbury's advert, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's
I
got
haven't.
there's an old boy on there, and the lady hands him this bar of chocolate, and the old boy turns to her and says, "My daughter used to get me this every birthday. I've got a secret. I've never told her I don't like nuts," or something like that. But he doesn't realize he's actually, because he's got Alzheimer's, because they're supporting the Alzheimer's charity. And I just said to my wife, I was like, wow, it's like, you bastards, you've got me.
Mm.
It doesn't make me want to buy the chocolate, but I remember the story. So you know that subconsciously, when I then go into the supermarket and I'm picking up, I'll remember the story, and I'll probably get the one with nuts in, you know? And it's just, I think that's one thing I don't particularly like about the way food gets marketed these days is, you know, it's a bit like, I saw someone recently talking about, you know, they've got to stop making vapes have all these bright, beautiful colors on, because they're just appealing to kids. And I think that's, like you say, it's like when you do those things, those nice treats, not making a massive thing of it, you know. Again, we get McDonald's and stuff. It's that as a parent, you go, God, I'm never going to get my kids McDonald's. And then you realize it's like, you've just come back from the swimming club. It's
100%.
5:30. They've got like an hour before they've got to go to bed. And you think, oh,
You
crap.
haven't food shops, X, Y,
Yeah.
Z.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I love that. Is there something then that, is there anything that you guys do as a family that you kind of do fitness wise? Or obviously I know you're pretty active anyway, but is there something that when you're doing things or you're going out, do you kind of move towards the more active activities?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like, whenever we go out, there's always like a scooter involved, or Bobby wants to be chased or something like that. Rose has just started doing some exercise. Actually, we did some the other day in the house. She wants to kind of get back into those type of things now, post kids. And again, it's not something I've ever forced her to do. I wouldn't be able to, even if I wanted to. But you know, that's not the way that our dynamic works in our relationship. But she's to a point where she's like, yeah, I think I would like to do that, because, you know, long-term health and stuff like that. So I think it's mostly setting an example. Of course, we go for walks, but we also go to the cinema. So I wouldn't say that we actively try and pursue sports, even though we swim and stuff. We just try and pursue activity as a family. Now, that could be on the way to the cinema chasing each other. It can be, like I say, sometimes we go for walks. We're always play fighting in the house and stuff like that. Sometimes we do a workout in the garage and both the kids come in there. We did it the other week. It was an absolute disaster. Everyone ended up in tears pretty much by the end of it. But, you know, you live and you learn. And I try and do it through play. Like with Bobby, sometimes I'll bring her in the garage gym. We'll set up the resistance bands on the rig, and she's like bouncing on them like a bungee. And then I'll use like the drop pads like stepping stones, and she jumps from one to the other, and just make it
Amazing.
through play. I think through kids, like their neuroplasticity is so amazing that I think sometimes we dull down what kids are capable of. Like, they can learn movement patterns and things really better than adults, but they need to have it done, from my personal experience, through play and through enjoyment. Like, they don't care about rationalizing things and what's going to give them dividends tomorrow, not alone 10 years down the line. They just want to know, is it fun? Does dad enjoy doing it with me? Let's go. Those type of things.
Yeah, exactly. And do you know what's really funny? It just literally just made me think then, is that why you do BJJ then? Because you can fight the kids. Is that what it is?
Oh,
to protect yourself?
100%. I've asked Bobby, does she want to try it? She's like, nope, not one bit. But now she's like, Dad, let's do jiu-jitsuing. And then she basically just jumps on me and we try and play fight. That's what we were doing yesterday, actually.
Oh, amazing. Do you know what is when you come to things like, you know, doing stuff with the kids, and, you know, my daughter is on half term this week, and she said something really sweet to me today earlier on, because we quite often, a lot of what we do is we've got 3 dogs, so we'll go out for a walk with the dogs.
Yeah.
And she just said to me this morning, she said, "Oh, Dad," she goes, can we do something just you and me today, like we do like every half term?" And she said, "But can we do it without the dog, so it's just you and me?" And
Love
like,
that.
you know, she'd quite happily go down the beach and do the exact same thing, where she wants that like focus on How do you juggle that when you are self-employed, you run your own business, and kind of being present as a dad?
Incredibly hard, in all honesty. I historically never had the best work life relationship. I will quite often be there till late doing work. Got a lot better over it since the kids have been here, to be honest, in the past few years. Um, but it is a challenge. Like, one thing I started doing last year is, when Bobby's at school, I set a half an hour alarm when she gets back from work. So I've got half an hour to play with her, just me and her time. Crafting is normally what she loves doing before I go back to work for a few hours. I typically stop my online stuff by 5 o'clock, but then sometimes I have evening PTs, or I have a HTK call or something along those lines. Weekends, nothing goes in now apart from family and kids time.
I
So
love
we
that.
spend a lot of time doing that. But yeah, I won't lie. She'll say, "Daddy, you're always working," or "When are you not working?" or "When are you this?" And look, I'm not gonna be here and stand here or sit here and try and make everything rose tinted glasses. Like, there's certain sacrifices you make as a kid, and there's certain things that happen as a parent, which is constantly a balancing act. And as parents, we feel a huge amount, I think, of guilt and responsibility sometimes to make sure their food is perfect, to make sure their exercise is great, to make sure you're giving them enough time, to make sure you're getting enough sleep and looking after yourself. But everything's a balance. Some people are going to be better at their work-life balance than I am. Some people maybe don't feed their kids as well as I. I'm not comparing one person to the other. I think the most important thing, and I stick through this through my childhood and the kind of the struggles that we went through in the relationship with my mum and dad, is the most important thing you can give a child is love and security in time. Like,
Absolutely.
like, they don't mind. Well, I'm sure they prefer it, but if you haven't got as much time as someone else, it's about how you spend that time with people. Are you just sitting on your phone ignoring them, or are you engaging with them and being present with them? Is a very different thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing that struck out to me then is that love and support that they want. You could just be sat there, whether it is watching a little, kids program with them, but it's the fact that you've got that closeness, that connection. We just talked about energy with the community, but it is that energy that you get being in the room with someone and just knowing they're there. I've recently been doing the 4 p.m. no work. My daughter's school bus drops her off right outside the door at 4
Love
p.m.
that.
And as soon as I know that I would probably do this wrong, or I'd fail if I didn't hold myself accountable. So who's the one person who's going to kick my ass if I don't do it? Her.
Yeah.
You know how many times since January she's gone, Dad, are you doing work? It's 4 p.m. I'm like, okay, good point. Good point. Okay, fine. And do you know what? That is way better than any, you know, drill marshal PT standing beside me
Yeah.
saying, you must do this.
They have a hotline straight to your heart, your kids. So it doesn't like they can say one thing and it can crush you and make your day. Bobby comes back from school every day at like 3:30. First thing she does when she walks through the door is, "Hi, Dad." And instantly, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, I just break into a massive smile that I'm the first thought that she has when she comes home. And
Yeah.
actually, that's from a selfish perspective, that's probably my favorite thing of being a dad, is you stop sweating the small stuff so much, because what's important is glaringly obvious in your face. Of course, you still feel the pressures of being a dad and just generally being an adult, but you can be having what would have been a much worse day in years gone by, and then they come around and just give you a smile, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's what's important." And it's a great kind of equalizer, I think.
Yeah, yeah. When you think about how life was different before you had kids, is there anything that you don't do now that you used to do before kids?
Probably lots. Time. Like Rose and I, yeah, we don't do nowhere near as many date nights or social time, just time, just me and Rose, because we have the kids, and actually we love that, but we probably don't have the best ratio of that. To be honest, we went out to cinema the other week. We watched the new Captain America, and that was the first time in I can't remember how long. We actually went a couple of months back. We went to a live kind of quartet orchestra thing that I've never done before, that they were doing like Coldplay, and we were giggling all the way through. It was like, oh my god, we had kids and we turned into adults. What happened? Which was brilliant. But I mean, we do live for the kids to a great extent. But yeah, there's certain, I don't have the same freedoms of time that I used to have, because they are the top of my list, and they take up a good chunk of my time. And most of the time, good majority of the time, that is what I would choose to be doing anyway.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely love that. So John, tell me, I know anyway, but tell me a little bit more about how HTK became HTK and why harder to kill.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I started online programming, team training, like group training, because I work a lot one-to-one with people online. But because it's one-to-one, it obviously comes with a higher cost. And for whatever reasons, whether the amount of support someone needs or what they're looking for, that might not always be the best option for them. So I set up my HTK group training plan, and basically it's about making yourself harder to kill. And now I don't just mean that in terms of, oh, I can fight for myself. That's actually a small amount of what it's about. Being harder to kill, from my perspective, is a wholesome aspect of like improving your life, improving your fitness, sure, improving your health, improving your muscle mass, improving your mentality. Because ultimately, it's actually a thing that was on CrossFit Level 1, which I quite like, and they had something called the Health and Wellness Continuum, and it's like a speedometer from like 0 to 10. Now, if 0 is very poor health, let's say 0 is not existing anymore, you've died. Let's say 10 is optimal health. Well, if someone comes in and we start working together, and let's say they're at a 3 out of 10 in health, obviously there's lots of scope for improvement there, but the chances of them having certain diseases, states, metabolic conditions, maybe diabetes, or let's say, heaven forbid, they get put into hospital, the buffer they have against that illness is diminished, and the chances of that become more serious for them is potentially greater. Whereas if someone started at a 3, they move their health to 7. First off, the chance of them getting ill in the first place, especially from metabolic issues like diabetes, is reduced greatly, but also their ability to bounce back and how close to kind of the lower numbers is diminished because they have a better, base core level of health. And that's the way I kind of look at HCK. It's much more than just being physically strong. Of course, bone density, muscle mass are incredibly important. They are literally armor for your body, from like taking away from the risk factors again of metabolic diseases or issues like diabetes, heart disease, because muscle's metabolically active. It uses our fuel sources. If we have more muscle mass, we typically are going to burn more calories a day when you compare that to someone who has a higher fat mass and less muscle mass. And it feels better. It makes you be able to do more. You can do more with the kids. You can run for longer. You can enjoy those things. And ultimately, it's just about having a better quality of life. And what we do now is really just accruing interest for what we do later in life. I think probably one of my, I wouldn't say fear actually, but one of the things that I'm really adamant in avoiding later in life is losing my independence. Like, you can have two people that are in their 70s to 90s, and one person is in a chair and can't move, can't sit up out the chair. And I shared a story the other day of one guy, and of course he's an outlier. He's deadlifting 160 kilos and squatting 100 kilos
I
at
saw
90
that.
something,
Yeah,
90
yeah.
something years old. And we've got research studies that show the bone density and muscle mass of, I think it was like I'd have to remember the study off the top of my head, but basically they're in their 70s, 80s. One was a triathlete and one was a sedentary individual. And the amount of fat mass around their legs, muscle mass, and then bone density is like massively different. I think I went through it in my webinar. I've got another webinar coming up in March, is what I'm going to do as well, which will break it a little bit more into those type of things. But your life quality, life longevity, which once again goes back to my main ethos and why I exercise, is greatly improved just on resistance training alone, which is actually why I don't really look at exercise as a tool for losing weight. We take that into account as our activity, because you just don't burn that many calories in a workout. 300 to 500 calories for most people, unless you're doing a long endurance stuff or maybe something like Jiu-Jitsu, for example. But it's just not that powerful. You let your steps and let your daily calorie intake take control of that. Use your gym time or whatever resistance exercise you're doing as your chance to make yourself harder to kill, build muscle mass, build bone density, because that's the stuff that's going to pay you dividends in the long term. And when you start getting, well, actually, we used to think it was post menopause, but I actually have a client that I work with out in Germany, and she works in this field. She said, actually, no, we see it from 30s onwards. Ladies
Wow.
lose bone density at a faster rate than men, which then puts them at a greater risk of osteopenia and falls and breaks later in life. And, you know, fall over and breaking your femur is no joke, or your hip. And obviously that's worst case scenario. But if you have more flexibility, proprioception, muscle mass, bone density, the chance of you falling to start with are less because you're more capable. And then the chance of you breaking because you have a thicker bone and more muscle around it is also less. And these aren't to be sniffed at in my eyes. And that's really the way I look at it. It is performance short term, but ultimately it's all encompassed in living longer and living better.
I love that. And do you know what? The thing that really like strict out on me then is like, I look at recently I saw one of my dad's old mates, and he was walking through town and he's chatting away with his other half. He's like shouting, "All right, Casey," proper Devonian boy he is, Mickey. And he says, "Oh, how's your old man?" I was like, "Shit, he's the same age as my old man." He's walking through town and my dad's using a bloody walker with wheels on. And they're two different guys. They both used to do the same stuff together, but the way that, you know, they just different, you know, what they've done in life and so forth. And I think it's very, I used to make this comment. I always want to make sure I used to make sure that I want to be fit and healthy enough to take my daughter to the pub when I'm older.
Yeah.
I don't drink. I don't drink at all now. But what's funny with that is the fact that actually, as I've kind of progressed with being a dad, I've actually realized that actually it's not the going to the pub, it's just doing experiences with her. And I want to be the granddad. Do you know what I mean? I want to be the guy that picks up, because I know that, you know, my dad, for example, couldn't, when my daughter was younger, he couldn't even probably lift up my daughter. So I want to be the example for my kids, but I want to be able to support my kids with their kids, you know?
100%. This is what that's actually my sister's main ethos. So my sister has MS, which my dad passed away from, and she found out, you know, what, like 8 years ago, something like that now. And her goal and her fear from that was that she wanted to do what our mum can do, and she wanted to take care of her kids and be able to look after the grandchildren. So she actually made the decision in the middle of COVID, rather than taking the meds, to go and have stem cells in Mexico, which is the only way you can really pause it. And as things stand, we say she doesn't have MS anymore. Of course, she has
Oh,
a
wow.
gene for
Yeah.
it, but it's paused. There's no more lesions come up on her spinal cord or any of those type of things. And I've trained her kind of through all that, and it's really inspiring to see her just grab the bull by the horns. Like, now, medical to say, no, you've got to do 5 years of meds before we even consider stem cells in the UK. But 5 years in MS, especially in women who can be more active in, that can be a difference between you and I talking now and not being able to talk and being in a wheelchair. And she's like, fuck that, I'm not standing on my laurels with this. And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, what a badass. And she did it in the middle of COVID, when no one was, we were all scared of flying. She had to come back. When you have like a year's worth of chemo in, I think, about 2 weeks. So you have two immune systems. You have your adaptive and your innate immune system. Your innate immune system is the immune system you're born with. Your adaptive is the one that comes from all the things you've experienced in life, vaccines you've had. So all her vaccines get wiped out, all that type of stuff. So
Wow.
she's coming back on flights in the height of COVID with no immune system. And
Ooh.
I'm like, this is terrifying. And she was meant to go back and be in a hotel because she had to do quarantine, if you remember. And this is when we were
Yeah,
all
yeah,
super
yeah.
scared of COVID. So it was really heightened. But my brother-in-law, my sister's partner, Ian, he spoke to MP and got it so she could come straight home. And because she was so proactive and healthy, she handled the chemo really well because she was fit and healthy. And we trained all the way through her MS, but it was very much a case of protecting what we had. Whereas since stem cells, she's just been hitting PBs week on week, just kind of just progressing now, which is amazing. And it kind of links on to the thing that you were saying about your dad, is that, you know, we are all going to be predisposed to certain things genetically. Like, I say, genetics loads a gun, lifestyle pulls a trigger. Now, we aren't solely in control of what will happen to us later in life, from things that are in our body potentially, and also, you know, uh, horrible things that just happen in life generally, like that blindside you. But you can't focus on them. What you can focus on is the things that you can control. and the things that you can do. Because at the end of the day, that's all we can do in life. For the most part, we're just here for the ride, and you've just got to, try and enjoy it as much as you can and really find the beauty in things. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I really got from kind of therapy and stuff like that is and this is the best thing kids give you, like I said earlier. They give you perspective and they bring you into the present. You are like when your kids are hanging off your ankles or you're worried about them choking on an apple, like you live in the present and never more than when you have kids because you have to. And I think that's
Yeah.
actually a really valuable thing.
Yeah. And do you know what? They are definitely the biggest testers of your
Nerves.
inner, yeah, your inner and your outer strength, right? Because
Yes.
like my brain and my mind has never been so tested when it's like, little thing. And my daughter's had lots of hospital operations and that kind of thing. But then when you they come home from school, they're like, someone said something to them and your brain
Yeah.
goes into this like protective mode. And even
100%.
I mean, especially when my daughter she had all her hip operations, she had bilateral hip dysplasia.
Hmm.
And I remember the first time we went to the park afterwards, after she'd had her plaster cast off after like 28 weeks, we were like letting her go down the slide, but we're like, you just become so protective of them because they are this
Yeah.
just
That's my one motto that I've stuck with since being a dad. I'm quite risk averse when it comes to health stuff, typically, because that's my kind of ethos. But you can't hold kids back and stop them from doing things because one, they will never know what they're capable of. Two, they're going to be risk averse their whole life, which I don't think is a good thing to do typically. But also, their risk of injury and stuff is greater because they don't understand their potential. And I saw a quote one day and it stuck with me. It's like, if you want to raise confident, capable kids, instead of being a wall in front of them, learn to be a cushion behind them. So now when she wants to run and jump on a wall, I'm like, yeah, go for it, babe. She doesn't know. I sprint up behind her and I'm
yeah.
there with my hands out to
Oh
catch her
yeah.
if she drops. But I don't stop her doing stuff anymore unless it's just a stupid thing, which obviously kids want to do sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think that's been my biggest learning and probably one of the harder things that I found to start with kids because they have you literally, like I said, they have a hotline to your heart. You want to protect them, and I mean it must have been rough for you, but nothing is worse than I can't think of anything worse than when your kids are ill or when they're seriously ill. I can't think of anything that I would find more uncomfortable and emotional than that, in all honesty.
No, but the one thing is, again, it comes back to when those kind of situations happen and when they arise, the one thing that comes straight back to this beginning of this conversation, which is probably a really good way to maybe wrap up, but like the
Mm.
community that supported us when we were going through all of the stuff with my daughter was just incredible. And I think it's a good thing for you to have that community, but also when they look at it, they just pass it on. And I think I love what I think I don't want to sound like I'm your number one stalker, John, but I think what I love about what you do and your ethos is just the fact that it's like harder to kill. When I first heard it, I thought, oh God, what's this? Especially when I saw the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was like, oh my God, JC's going to teach me how to fight or something. But like it's that having that strength, but like everything that comes with it. It's the future you. It's the you know people are so quick to look on the past. And I know I lost a hell of a lot of weight a few years ago, and I lost like I think it was just over 25 kilos, and it's the
Wow.
worst I've ever felt. I looked
Mhm.
great, but I didn't, because everyone was saying to me, oh, you look really skinny, Casey. And I was like, I never felt great. I was never strong. I was tired. I was grouchy with my daughter, grouchy with my wife. Now I'm 25 kilos heavier again. And I'm like, stronger. My brain is definitely working better, and I'm a better example to my daughter, my kid. We eat healthy, and I
Yeah.
know I told you this as well. We cut out eating anything that came in packets. So, things like protein bars and, buying loaves of bread. We've been making absolutely everything since the new year. And you know what? Just by doing stuff like that, and obviously with the support of, the HDK community with the workouts and, your online calls and stuff, it's really made like again, a big difference, not just to me, but then, you know, my daughter said at school the other day, said, oh, someone offered her some crisps or something. She went, I can't, because they come in a packet. And I was like, "Oosh."
Yeah, it's amazing. Like,
Like,
I mean, that's
not in a, like a negative way. It was more the
yeah.
fact that actually, because she understands what the crap's in there, you know?
But these are things like we don't maybe think about it, but these will be core memories for kids. Like, I remember when I used to make bread with my dad. Do you mean? And do you mean? And instead of having, oh, I remember when we used to go to McDonald's for X, Y, Z. Again, not saying that that's you can't have it in moderation. Of course you can, but there's very different, obviously, value to them when if you can attach positive association to time spent, actually time spent with a family member that you adore, and also it's attached to doing things that are going to benefit their health long term. If you're there making bread together, it's amazing, and they'll probably want to do it with their kids. And you know that's the type of way that you break generational stuff as well, which I think everyone to a certain extent carries some of that, just gets passed down, and that's the stuff that's kind of pretty hard to kind of intervene against, to be honest.
Amazing. John, thank you so much for today. How can people find you in the world of, obviously I know you're on social media and stuff. What's the best way for people to find out more about John's world?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, John Philip Chapman, 2 L's in Philip. Don't know why my dad did that, but he did. So John Philip Chapman on there, and I think you can find johnchapmanfitness.com, and I'll be there as well.
Amazing. John, thank you so much. You're an
Mate,
absolute
my pleasure.
superstar. And that wraps up today's episode of the Coffee, Chaos and Confidence podcast with me, Coach Casey. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you like and subscribe. It helps other listeners find the show. Also, go and check out the show notes to learn more about my incredible guests. Until next time, make sure you chase your dreams without limitations.